Hi folks, thanks for tuning in. The notion of taste is explored in both philosophical analysis and in ordinary conversation about aesthetic experience. People are praised if they display good taste in their choice of art, entertainment, decor and clothes. Likewise, they're criticised for dubious preferences. To a degree, there are shared social standards concerning taste. That is to say, there are some aesthetic choices which would strike most people as bad. To get a sense of what I mean, type into Google bad home decor or tattoo fails and you'll quickly get the idea. Other artworks can be widely praised. Google best movies of all time and you'll see what I mean. At the same time, taste is also intensely personal. In youth culture, some dress as goths, some dress as punks, some are into hip-hop, some feel they look best if they just dress normally. As the saying goes, there's no accounting for taste. On some level, our preferences then can't be explained. We just like what we like. But what is taste? Why do we use that word? Is the distinction between good and bad taste meaningful, or is it culturally determined? That's the topic for today's clip. So let's think about taste in art. My principal resource for today's clip comes from a chapter by Carolyn Korsmeyer titled Taste, which is in the Routledge Companion to Aesthetics. As ever, I'll include a link to the book below. The aesthetic responses we experience tend to be understood as immediate and powerful reactions that are not wholly the result of conscious choice. Just as a love of chocolate seems immune to persuasion, taste for decoration, music, movies or other art seems in part to emerge from an individual's psychological makeup and personality, as well as their cultural background. Is beauty then truly in the eye of the beholder, or do standards of taste indicate on some level our objective level of sensitivity? In other words, do some of us really have better taste than others? If we agree that there are standards for aesthetic enjoyment, how do we distinguish good from bad taste? Moreover, why do we sometimes find ourselves actually preferring things that we suspect are in bad taste? Most of us know what it's like to enjoy movies and songs, for example, that we acknowledge are not of the highest merit. This is sometimes called a guilty pleasure. While aesthetic taste is linked to both quality and enjoyment, then, artwork of the highest quality does not necessarily give us the most pleasure. Okay, so these are some of the preliminary questions we can ask about taste in art. Let's now have a think about the metaphor of taste and the controversies that this term entailed. In a literal sense, the word taste refers to the immediate enjoyment of eating and drinking. But how does this connect to our various aesthetic preferences? This has been a matter of philosophical controversy for centuries. Use of the term taste as a metaphor for artistic preference arose in Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries. The term aesthetics itself also came into usage at about the same time. As we all know, taste in the literal sense refers to one of the five senses alongside sight, hearing, smell and touch. As a bodily sense, taste is linked with pleasure or displeasure. That is to say, it is a sensory response that tends to carry a positive or negative experience. In this respect, it is like aesthetic appreciation. We either enjoy it or we don't. When eating, taste allows for degrees of expertise of judgment. In that respect, it is a useful metaphor. A person of limited palate may not care whether she or he is eating a well-prepared meal, but one with a finely developed sense of taste is able to discern even small amounts of seasonings that went into its preparation. The same goes for wine tasting, of course. Experts can discern flavours that the rest of us can't. This concept can be extended to the appreciation of art. In this respect, artistic taste also requires experience and education. The 18th century philosopher David Hume makes central use of the idea that taste in art is developed in ways rather similar to taste for food and drink. To function properly, the evaluative sentiments must be in good working order. Just as a person with a bad cold is not in a position to assess the qualities of a meal, so an inexperienced and naive person is not well situated to judge the qualities of art. If someone at a dinner party comments that their meal has a pleasant though subtle hint of cumin and nobody else noticed it, this discerning diner has proven themselves to possess a particularly delicate sense of taste. In turn, if an art connoisseur can look at Vermeer's painting The Milkmaid and comment insightfully on the use of lighting, colour palette, composition, harmony and perspective, they likewise have finely tuned senses. While Hume doesn't specify what he considers to be the objective qualities of beauty, he suggests that one of the primary ways we can develop our own tastes is to practice enjoying the great works that have already achieved recognition and withstood the test of time. In other words, from a modern perspective, to refine our own tastes, we should learn to appreciate the works of Beethoven, Van Gogh, Jane Austen, Alfred Hitchcock, and so on, the great masters, so to speak. The German philosopher Immanuel Kant was an appreciative critic of Hume's, though he didn't agree that taste emerges as a general agreement amongst critics. Kant wanted a clearer account of aesthetic judgment, which required him to emphasize the distinction between that which is merely pleasant and that which is beautiful. For Kant, aesthetic taste is not sensuous or pleasant in the way it can be if you're having a nice warm bath. It is not a product of satisfied desire such as you get when eating good food or drink. True aesthetic experience in art, for Kant, goes beyond the mere sensuous and immediate pleasure and offers something more profound or important than that. So, Kant offered these ideas in the 18th century then. Following this, the issue of aesthetic taste was dormant for a long period, but was eventually brought back to life in the mid-20th century by the British philosopher Frank Sibley. Sibley's argument makes a distinction between aesthetic and non-aesthetic qualities. Some qualities of art can be noticed by anyone with normally functioning senses who is paying sufficient attention. For example, the fact that a painting features two birds is non-aesthetic. It's a quality readily discernible to anyone who can see and count. The same goes for seeing that the birds are predominantly red. These sorts of qualities are also value neutral in that they do not tell you whether it is a good artwork or not. Aesthetic qualities, by contrast, are the properties that distinguish an object as worthy of appreciation or criticism: delicate, elegant, powerful, profound, stiff, awkward, and so on. These are examples of aesthetic qualities. They're not easily discerned by all perceivers, but rather require the exercise of sensitivity that Sibley labels taste. In other words, once we're able to move beyond the details which are readily discernible to anyone who can see and hear, we start to show taste. Let's now turn to distinctions between good and bad taste. Like I've already said, taste may be considered an ability to discern subtle qualities in objects. In food and drink, the person with fine taste can notice trace quantities of herbs or other flavours that lie beneath the detectable threshold for others. Likewise, a connoisseur with good artistic taste is more able to discern subtle points of style that distinguish a genuine painting of an old master from a modern forgery. Perhaps the connoisseur is able to immediately tell Vivaldi from Bach, or whether a Charlie Parker recording is from 1945 or 1952, depending on the style in which he plays. A sensitivity to aesthetic detail is part of the ability to rank objects of taste in terms of quality as well. The gourmet taster can select the better wine. In art, the connoisseur is able to discern which painting is by a respected abstract painter and which is by a chimpanzee, while to the uninitiated they may appear more or less the same. Taste can also be measured by how much enjoyment the object gives the discerning viewer. That is to say, those who are discerning get more pleasure from artworks praised by experienced critics rather than those praised by the average viewer. According to IMDb, for which anyone can judge, the 5 highest praised movies of all time, are arguably the 5 greatest movies of all time, are The Shawshank Redemption, The Godfather, The Dark Knight, Godfather Part 2 and Lord of the Rings Return of the King. According to the Sight and Sound magazine's critics poll, which is judged by specialists rather than the general public, the top 5 films are Vertigo, Citizen Kane, Tokyo Story, Rules of the Game, and Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans. So the idea here is that the first list of movies, the IMDb list, can offer a compelling experience to the general viewer, but to those who have spent more time studying cinema, immersing themselves in the art form and sharpening their sensitivities, the second list offers more meaningful experiences. Not everybody is going to appreciate that assertion, though. Indeed, those who are accused of being less discerning, perhaps they prefer Godfather to Vertigo, or prefer The Dark Knight to Rules of the Game, are likely to resent the judgment and also the soundness of criteria used to distinguish good taste from bad. Indeed, even to say that one film is better than another is enough to offend the person whose taste is being called into question. We can go even further and say that the very popularity of certain artworks, such as the movie Frozen or the music of Black Eyed Peas, may seem to be evidence for the absence of aesthetic quality. Their very popularity may be a sign that they're not of the highest artistic merit. In other words, lots of people like Frozen and Black Eyed Peas, but so the argument goes, what the hell do they know, right? This idea, ironically, splits off actual aesthetic pleasure from the idea of the best aesthetic taste. That which gives the most pleasure might in fact be a sign of low aesthetic merit. In turn, this means that high aesthetic quality in an artwork must be by its very nature difficult, such that only a minority of specialists will be able to truly appreciate it. As in the case of Frasier Crane and his brother Niles from the TV sitcom Frasier, those who conceive of themselves as belonging to a select minority who have good taste may condescend to those with inferior tastes, while the rest of us may consider guys like Frasier and Niles snobs with no objective standards to support their own preferences. Situations that are likely to promote the cultivation of refined tastes such as leisure and education tinge the notion of aesthetic discernment with a certain air of social privilege. It's from here that aesthetic discernment becomes associated with snobbery. You supposedly only have refined tastes because you're lucky enough to be granted time and resources to cultivate them. This notion led the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu to the conclusion that the very idea of taste is more of a social than an aesthetic category, that the elite of any society more or less impose their personal tastes on the public, who dutifully acknowledge the superiority of the objects of elite preference while pursuing their own more swinish and amusing tastes. Bourdieu suggests then that aesthetic preferences are the product of class distinctions rather than the recognition of standards of quality. In other words, fine wine isn't objectively better than a can of Coke. That's just what the wealthy elite believe, and the rest of us accept it. This idea doesn't feel quite right to me, however, since those from lower financial brackets can appreciate fine art and good literature too. Ironically, a lot of fine artists themselves don't have much money because being an artist doesn't usually pay well. Artists praised today, such as Egon Schiele, Paul Gauguin and Vincent van Gogh, all died penniless. In addition, those with a lot of money can still have poor aesthetic judgment or have very garish tastes. We can also keep in mind the fact that the same person can harbour tastes for radically different types of art, whether they're high or lowbrow. Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker recently became one of my favourite movies, but that doesn't stop me from enjoying Star Wars. It all depends on what mood I'm in. Right? Taste then describes an ability to enjoy certain works of art as well as an ability to discern subtle aesthetic details. If you spend time refining your sensitivities, not only do you notice more things, but you also acquire a taste for various artworks which you might not have previously appreciated. But the fact that we can enjoy works of art which aren't necessarily of the highest merit mean that we need to think about the different types of pleasure that can be drawn from artworks. The British philosopher Bernard Bosanquet, who was around in the late 19th and early 20th century, has commented that there are different types of aesthetic pleasure. He distinguished easy from difficult beauty. Easy beauty is immediately pleasant and can be instantly discerned and appreciated by practically anyone. Difficult beauty might be harder to appreciate than easy beauty, but may be more rewarding in the long run. This is like saying that it's easy to enjoy a bag of crisps, but if you learn to appreciate brie, that appreciation cuts deeper. So it goes with art. Difficult pleasure may include appreciation of stories with painful or tragic subject matter. It can also include complex works of art that demand a kind of focus and attention that frequently one is too tired or distracted to undertake. This would include avant-garde music and literature, such as the music of Stravinsky or the books of James Joyce. Indeed, one way to account for engaging with putatively lowbrow art would be by saying that you are looking for something that is immediately pleasant to engage with. Perhaps we don't always have the mental energy to engage with something truly good because it is demanding. Complex art can strain both the head and the heart. So in these instances, art is supposed to be hard. Some artworks might have the veneer of fine art, but are actually very easy to enjoy, perhaps off-puttingly easy, as in the case of the painter Jacques Vetriano or the musical conductor André Rieu. The work of both these guys are popular, but not particularly well regarded amongst critics because their work is arguably too sanitized. A Vetriano makes it almost too easy to enjoy fine art. André Rieu makes classical music almost feel like pop music. Then of course there's art that we call kitsch, which is designed to appeal to popular markets but is generally considered tacky. With that in mind, kitsch objects are sometimes enjoyed in a knowingly ironic and humorous way. Interestingly, although they're considered to be of limited artistic merit, there are artists who produce work which is considered kitsch, but are nonetheless skillfully made, such as the paintings of the 19th century French artist William Adolphe Bouguereau. To conclude then, if refined taste is just about appearing wealthy or upper class, there isn't much point in it. However, one may suggest that the effort to refine one's taste is in fact a valuable and meaningful part of life. For some, maybe one of the most valuable parts of life, and something we're fortunate to be able to do, whatever social class we belong to. Fine wine may still be expensive, but you don't need to be wealthy to explore classical music, free jazz, abstract art, or European art cinema, especially now that most of us have access to the internet. It's all right there on the internet waiting to be discovered. All you need is a disposition to be receptive to aesthetic virtues that you hadn't considered before. Okay, so that's it for this clip. As ever, thank you for watching. Feel free to leave a like, comment and subscribe. Bye for now.